Round 3 here at Grand Prix Los Angeles. TJ Rogers with Jake Van Lunen, and it is Tim Trendahl up against Mark Herberholz. Both of these players getting set 2-0. It's a good way to kick things off. Coming off of the PTQ, to correct that, it was the top 8 was this morning, actually, that he won. So this morning he had a bit of a busy one, came away with the win, and now he is diving right from that into the Grand Prix, and it's going to be Ether Hub from Trendahl. Looks like it's going to be the island just from Herberholz kicking it back. And I'm seeing looks like green-black on the right side of the battlefield. On the left, I do see Champion of Wits. I believe this looks to be a black-blue deck. Might be floating around in the Esper. Looks like we're getting those now.
It looks like it's
just black-blue good stuff. Just the old mid-range standby.
Yep, and it's going to be green-black Constrictor on the right side of the battlefield. So, how do you feel about this matchup? Both of them a little bit in the mid-rangey. One of them going for the much larger creatures. The other one kind of in a one-for-one removal stage.
So Tim Trendahl's deck really relies on putting together combinations of different creatures. Mark's deck is, in many ways, just a pile of removal spells. That means it's going to be really hard for Tim to ever assemble those combos that make his cards their most powerful that they can be. So I'd have to say that I like Mark's chances in this matchup, especially pre-board. Post-board, Tim Trendahl can change his deck up quite a bit, adding multiple copies of cards like Shaper's Sanctuary and Lifecrafter's Bestiary are definitely going to help him a lot here, but in game one, Mark's got to love his chances.
So we see an Essence Scatter take down the Walking Ballista, and it's followed up by a Champion of Wits for Herberholz, who is going to throw a Glintstream Siphoner and a Vraska's Contempt to the graveyard. Maybe just an indicator of the quality that's in the hand already.
Yeah, I mean, it's likely that the rest of his cards are very similar in power level to those cards he discarded. He just needs a diverse way to deal with threats, and also wants to hold on to lands because he really needs to be hitting land drops 1 through 5 with a deck like this in order to operate at maximum efficiency.
Trendahl's going to take advantage of Herberholz being tapped out, throw down a Walking Ballista with 2 +1/+1 counters on it, putting 4 mana into it. We see an attack from that Champion of Wits, and it is going to be Never to Return. That is going to be pointing right at that one. 2 counters immediately going to be going right to the face.
And interestingly, Tim choosing there to send both those counters to the face instead of choosing to target the Champion of Wits with one of them. Perhaps not really 100% sure yet what he's up against. Maybe trying to prevent that Eternalize from happening. Also might be trying to prevent other graveyard interactions that he might be worried about.
Aethersphere Harvester hits the battlefield. That's going to be the 3/5 vehicle. You can pay some energy to give it that lifelink, but it is going to be in the air. It does have that flying ability.
And Mark's the type of player who may see that Aethersphere Harvester as an opportunity to gain some amount of card advantage by simply killing the crew creatures that come down. A little bit of a
trick shot here with the Champion of Wits. Did you see that? That was some style. Getting in the swing for 2. Right back to Trendahl. Doesn't look like, 5 mana left open when you also already have that Liliana Death's Majesty in hand. Jadelight Ranger coming down. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the top card of the library. We've got Explorer. That one's going to go to the hand. We do it twice. Top one, that's going to be a land. Draw 2 cards, 3 mana for a 2/1.
That's a really good deal. I think that we would all play that card. If it's just 2/1 for 3 that draws 2 cards and into the battlefield.
It's got to feel great. We're going to go ahead and crew up the Aethersphere Harvester. That 3/5 flyer is going to crash on in, knocking Mark scratch that. Vraska's Contempt. She's not liking it. She does not dig that Aethersphere Harvester is in the skies. Got to keep them clear for your piracy,
Yeah.
So it's going to be Rishkar, Pima, Renegade. That's going to hit the battlefield. +1/+1 counters for the team. A little bit of it helps out the mana touch, though at this point, having 6 mana right behind him, I'm not certain how much you're really going to need to be investing into those.
It also combos quite nicely with Whining Constrictor. When you play the Whining Constrictor on the second turn and then play Rishkar on the third turn, you end up with a 4/5 and a 4/4, and that could be a really, really potent play.
Liliana Death's Majesty hitting the battlefield. That is going to plus on up, make a zombie, mill some cards. Otherwise, can reanimate some creatures. Eventually, you can kill all the non-zombies, which there's going to be quite a few of them on the battlefield from Trendle.
Yeah, and now Mark's plan here, using that removal spell on the Walking Ballista and on the Ether Sphere Harvester. Mark is planning on gumming up the ground here, was hoping to use Liliana activations and the Champion of Wits to do so, and save removal spells for creatures that can either trample or fly.
It's going to be Vraska's Contempt. Eliminating that, it's the attack on in. Champion of Wits going to get in front of the Jadelight Ranger. A Fatal Push going to get in the way of this one. Do we have?
I don't know if he has... if he's had something die this turn.
I don't think we have Revolt at the moment. I think it's just been the Vraska's Contempt so far, which means that that's not going to have a great effect.
Yeah, no, and it's still legal target, so that goes to your graveyard if you do that.
Yeah.
Because the Fatal Push says, destroy it if it has converted mana cost 2 or less. And so you can target it, but if it doesn't have converted mana cost 2 or less, then it doesn't die.
Yeah, this is something that reminds me there was Red Elemental Blast and Pyroblast. Back in the day, one of them was counter-target red spell, the other one was counter-target spell if it's red.
Yeah.
And you would see some choice considerations in a deck that would have either, Young Pyromancer or Grim Lavamancer, because even if there wasn't a spell of that color, you could put it, at least cast it, put it in the graveyard, and then exile it, or get that 1/1 elemental token.
Yeah, that's a really good way of explaining that.
So it's going to be back to Mark. We did end up losing our Jadelight Ranger. The Champion of Wits did end up in the graveyard from that combat exchange. And it is going to be Argul's Bloodfast. Hitting the battlefield immediately, activating that one, willing to pay the 2 life, pay the 2 mana, fill up this hand. Argul's Bloodfast is a card that we have seen all over the place while it's been in Standard. An incredible source of card advantage.
Yeah, and Mark activating that main phase there because he wants to be hitting land drops. Still unable to find that 6th land. He does have a Torrential Gearhulk in his graveyard, so once he does find that 6th land, he should be in a pretty nice position here.
So it's 15 to 16 on the battlefield. A lot of open mana for Trendle. Have to see what can come up here. Llanowar Elves is going to be the play. It's going to be more of this mana, an issue that you were talking about earlier from the Stompy side of things. A lot of things that can produce mana, but this is going to be a payoff. 5 mana, Verdurous Gearhulk coming down, no Winding Constrictor to supplement it. But still, 4 +1/+1 counters going to be going across the battlefield and making a pretty sizable threat out of this Llanowar Elf, making that Pima into a 4/4. And it's going to be a Fatal Push taking down the Llanowar Elf. Also, we've got that 5/5 Verdurous Gearhulk Rishkar getting an attack in. And
I imagine Mark may want to use Torrential Gearhulk on his main phase. He chooses not to, but what I would be worried about here is Blossoming Defense, because I'm trying to figure out how I could be losing this game at this point.
There's going to be the Torrential Gearhulk. It's going to be likely Vraska's Contempt.
That's what I would expect.
Pointed there, and we do not have the Blossoming Defense. That is going to go to exile. It's just the Rishkar, but that does not line up well against this Torrential Gearhulk. And Mark Herberholz just coming away with this turn.
Yeah.
Got to be feeling good. Untapping with a 7 power on the battlefield. You've got the 5/6 as well as the 2/2 zombie. You've got Argul's Bloodfast to keep your hand full, so your draws are going to continue to be excellent. And Tim Trendle's a black-green Constrictor deck, a creature-based deck with not a single non-land permanent on the battlefield.
Mark doing work like it's the good old days.
We're going to go ahead and bring back Champion of Wits, draw 4, discard 2. This game is just closing out.
And Mark, his deck seems to be playing quite a few cards that might have been weaker to things like Goblin Chain Whirler. And a few weeks ago, it would be hard to play a deck like this. But this weekend, a lot of diversity here. And Mark really just taking things over this blue-black mid-range deck. I mean, he won a PTQ this morning. I think he won like a trial yesterday.
Yep.
He's just been winning.
Non-stop. what a way to warm up for the GP. You know,
Yeah.
wake up early.
He's on a crazy heater right now. I'd say that, like, if I had to guess who was going to win this Grand Prix right now, I'd pick Mark. Even though he doesn't have 3 buys.
Mm-hmm.
When Mark's on a heater, man, what are you going to do?
That's
Who's
the
going to stop
old-fashioned
him?
way.
Nah.
Go in there, get it done. That's 2 ways to qualify for the Pro Tour.
Yeah, you could start logging multiple qualifications.
Bam.
You know?
Get into this Player of the Year race right at the end. All right, so heading into the sideboard, we have got the Green-Black Constrictor deck. Anything that's really standing out to you in that sideboard? Cards that are going to really shore up that matchup, because that game was looking really rough.
Yeah,
for
so
Trundle.
Tim post-board has a lot he can bring in here. He has 4 copies of Duress. He has 2 copies of Lifecrafter's Bestiary. He has 2 Shaper's Sanctuary. He has 2 Vine Mares. He has a Vivian Reed. He has a Vraska's Contempt. It's almost hard to imagine how Tim's going to sideboard, because he wants to be bringing in double-digit numbers of cards. So he's going to have to drastically change how his deck plays the game if he wants to be sideboarding all these powerful cards. But I think he does. I think these cards are just great in the matchup. And, Mark's going to be on the draw here in Game 2. I imagine that he's going to have his work cut out for him, because post-board, Tim's deck seems really well set up for these control matchups. If we take a look over at Mark's sideboard, though, Mark also has, obviously, things to help in matchups like this. 1 copy of Doomfall, more Essence... he has... no, those aren't coming in this matchup. I misread what the card was. Well, it looks like Mark is actually a little short on cards for matchups like this. I think main deck, though, Mark's deck is very well suited to beat decks that like Green-Black Constrictor. And I'd still like to be in Mark's shoes here, being up a game. Obviously, you have 2 games. You only have to win one of them. But post-board, I would have to say things are definitely in Tim's favor. He gets bringing a lot of cards here.
And is part of this just that a lot of the cards that he's bringing in are more individually powerful, and a lot of his Game 1 required on building these synergies between Wine and Constrictor and, a multitude of these other cards that combine really nicely. Moving into the post-board matchup, a lot of these cards seem more individually powerful or useful in the matchup.
Yeah, and I think that's true. Something that Tim will have to watch out for, though, with how he sideboards, is that if he's bringing in cards like Shaper Sanctuary and cards like Lifecrafter's Bestiary, he needs to keep his creature count high enough so that he isn't drawing those cards and just having them be dead cards when they come off the top of his library, turn 5 or later. So he's going to want to find a way to sideboard where he's taking out spells and he's putting in cards like that. And if you do that, you can find yourself in a position where you might just lose to a runaway Glint Sleeve Siphoner or something of that variety. So, Tim, it's not going to be easy to figure out the correct numbers post-board here.
But they're there. They're somewhere in there.
They are probably there.
All right, well, the players are going to be getting set up. Heading into this one, was Blue-Black Midrange a deck that was on your radar at all?
I've played against it on Magic Online this week. Sometimes when my record was quite good in leagues, so I knew that there were people doing well with it. I've had a number of friends tell me they did not think the deck was good, but I mean, it plays so many powerful cards, right? It plays all the cards I want to be playing. And the fact that there are a decent chunk of red opponents who are coming this weekend without Chain Whirlers in their main deck, who are playing these 18-land Flame of Keld type of red decks, that means that, it's not the most insane thing ever to be playing Glint Sleeve Siphoner Champion of Wits deck in this room this weekend.
Yeah, not too many of them floating around. All right, I like it. It's going to be a good one. I think Jerry Thompson was talking about playing that deck as well at one point as the spicy one, especially since we saw Corey Burkhart put up a really good performance with that last weekend. He ended up putting a copy of that Blue-Black mid-range into the top 8. Now we are going to have Tim Trindle on the play in this game too, so that is going to make some of the measures that Herberholz has available to him significantly worse when he's just going to be down a turn, down a land against this one. And some of his options, he's got copies of Censor in the main deck. A card like that, not quite as good on the draw.
Yeah, a card like that, you can get behind, find yourself in a situation where your opponent's just casting a 2-drop again on turn 3, and then your cards don't do much.
Yep, it's Adventurous Impulse to kick things off for Trendle, followed up by that Glint Sleeve Siphoner from Herberholtz on turn 2. This is going to be, it's got Menace, which means that an individual creature coming down this turn is not going to stop it from getting aggressive. Jadelight Ranger is the play. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the top card. It's Llanowar Elves, gets to pick putting that on top or putting it into the graveyard. We're going to leave that one on top. The other Explorer does happen. It's the same card. So we're going to end up with 2 +1/+1 counters on this. It's going to be a 4/3. Back to the Glintleaf Siphoner and Herberholtz. 2 lands available. The attack coming on in. That's going to go up to 2 energy, and we might see that extra card drawn next turn.
And with a deck with as much removal as Mark's, Tim's got to be really worried about a Glintleaf Siphoner just getting out of hand. People who have played a lot of, Modern understand that the combination of Dark Confidant with a lot of removal spells makes it extremely difficult for creature-based decks to ever have a shot of winning. And Glintleaf Siphoner serves a very similar function in a matchup like this.
And it's going to be another one coming down. So 2 of these Siphoners, they each have Menace. They both have the ability to accrue that energy when they attack. I mean, with 2 of these combined, that means that you're gaining that 2 energy required each turn. Tim's got to find something. We're going to get aggressive with the Jadelight Ranger, not interested in blocking with that one. So blocking not the priority. It's going to be Walking Ballista, 4 mana, 2 +1/+1 counters, comes down, takes down both of those Glintleaf Siphoners in a single shot.
Yeah, and that's just the perfect card there for Tim. Really nice play from him, setting it up, knocking it down. Glintleaf Siphoners off the table. We were worried about them, but Tim had the perfect card. And I think a lot of people may have been tempted to take out a card like Walking Ballista in a matchup where your opponent's not playing a bunch of smaller things, but recognizes the importance here and getting rewarded for it.
Ravenous Chupacabra hits the battlefield, eats up the Jadelight Ranger, and it's going to be followed up by the Llanowar Elves as well as Rishkar, putting a +1/+1 counter on each of these. Now a 2/2 and a 3/3 facing down the 2/2 Ravenous Chupacabra. It's already had its meal. It's feeling kind of satisfied right now. Just hanging out. And I think actually Trendle's got another copy of Walking Ballista in hand, which means that there's currently 6 mana available using that Rishkar as well as that Llanowar Elves, and it's going to be Shaper's Sanctuary that comes down to the battlefield. Nice little answer to a lot of the removal spells of this deck.
Yeah, Shaper's Sanctuary, just for 1 mana you get this enchantment that says that you can draw a card whenever your opponent targets one of your creatures with a spell, and Mark's going to respond with that Vraska's Contempt to prevent Tim from drawing a card there with the Shaper's Sanctuary.
Yep, so it's just the Llanowar Elves that is left, the 2/2. There's also 3 mana remaining on that battlefield, Shaper's Sanctuary. Good card, but not getting to draw anything just yet. So it's the Ravenous Chupacabra up against the Llanowar Elves. They have got equal stats. And it's going to be a Glintleaf Siphoner of our own from Trendle. Saw 2 of them, liked what he saw, decided to, put it up in his own deck, put it down on his battlefield, see if he can get in this card draw game.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a great card in this matchup against Mark. Mark doesn't have cards like Walking Ballista or Shade Whirler. Gets to take full advantage of Confidant-like ability.
So 5 mana on the side of Herberholtz. Field of Ruin available, though not a whole lot of phenomenal targets. None of those transforming cards like Search for Azcanta that becomes Azcanta the Sunken Rune, anything like that. And it's just going to be a pass back, keeping this mana open. There is a Vraska's Contempt in hand. And we're going to use that energy to draw the extra card. Aether Hub no longer has any energy available. And it's going to be a Duress. If there's a play to be made from Herberholtz, it's going to have to be now.
I imagine Herberholtz may simply want to be aggressively looking for something like a Scarab God.
So there's a Vraska's Contempt in hand, going for the Supreme Will instead. And it looks like we might be going for the Impulse version of it. Take a look at the top 4, put one of them into the hand. This is going to be a card to where Trendle's going to get to see what actually gets taken off of this, because that Duress is going to get a good look at it. That's going to have to be a consideration for Herberholtz when he takes the card.
I like that play a lot from Mark, though. Mark recognizing that he's not going to win a game against the Shaper's Sanctuary where he's just playing removal spells and trying to control things. He needs to find threats of his own to win the game that way.
So taking a look, we see Essence Scatter, Champion of Wits, and Vraska's Contempt. That is going to be going to the graveyard. And that Glintstream Siphoner is going to be attacking on in. 2 more damage. Not a really high power game so far. You know, we've seen a couple of Walking Ballistas, some Glintstream Siphoners. The biggest thing that we've had on the battlefield was Rishkar.
Mark just drew a real nice one there. Oh, and a pair on back-to-back draw steps.
Whoa. The Scarab God coming down to the battlefield. The 5/5 Mark has got to be feeling good about that. The duress couldn't have taken it, but it also couldn't have prepared him at this point. Whew. That's going to be a monster on this battlefield. There's the Ravenous Chupacabra in the graveyard as an option to have a removal spell through grabbing another one of these creatures. Could go for a Walking Ballista, and it's not going to last. Vraska's Contempt is going to eliminate it, exile it, gain 2 life. Trindle had the right answer.
Yeah, Trindle needed that Vraska's Contempt. Was wise to, bring in an extra copy here post board. But Mark, we know that he had another draw step that was a Scarab God. So
back to back. It's a card so nice we'll do it twice. You know? The Glintstream Siphoner still getting its damage in. Herberholtz is down to 14. Trendle's still at 20. But if this Scarab God goes uncontested, this is really going to start shifting the scales.
Yeah, it's really hard to win with a deck like Constructor when your opponent's untapping with a Scarab God on the battlefield and has a Ravenous Chupacabra in their graveyard.
I do not see a Vraska's Contempt in that hand. I see an Adventurous Impulse, a Walking Ballista, but not a whole lot of options here. This 5/5 is going to start running the game. It's another attack in for 2 from this Glintstream Siphoner, and it's going to be a Jadelight Ranger digging through the top 2 cards a bit. Oh, and we're going to actually activate that Lifecrafter's Bestiary first. Now, I believe that's when you cast it, so it's going to be draw first, and then the Jadelight Ranger enters the battlefield, and that's where we're going to have our 2 Explore triggers. Llanowar Elves and a land. The land's going to go to the graveyard. That doesn't answer a Scarab God.
Yeah. Llanowar Elves hitting the bin. Draw that land off the top. Make sure we don't draw on the following turn.
So it's the Scarab God looking down Jadelight Ranger. Herberholtz untapping. We've got Essence Scatter in hand, and I think we actually have 2 copies of Essence Scatter and a Champion of Wits. That Champion of Wits that we saw earlier, which was grabbed off of the Supreme Will. The attack in for 5 comes in. Trendle falls to 15. Only 1 energy available for Trendle at the moment, and we are going to take our draw for the turn. It is a copy of Walking Ballista. So 2 Walking Ballista up against 2 Essence Scatter. I think the Essence Scatter wins that one.
I think you're right. Though, for what it's worth, Tim will get to draw an additional card with the Shaper Sanctuary when the Ravenous Chupacabra gets reanimated.
Great point, because that is whenever a spell or ability targets a creature that you control. So we're going to point that there. And it looks like we actually may not have... I don't think I saw him grab that trigger.
Oh, no. So he may have missed the trigger there for the Shaper Sanctuary.
And the 4/4 Ravenous Chupacabra is going to get in front of the Jadelight Ranger, and that is a huge shift in that case. 2 creatures attacking now, none of them. And Herberholtz is going to be untapping with 9 power available. It's a 4-mana play here. It's the Walking Ballista. There is a known Essence Scatter in hand from the negate previously, so that's going to get cast, though there is still the card draw from the Lifecrafter's Bestiary. But this is going to go right back to Herberholtz. 9 power on board, 1 of them a Ravenous Chupacabra, and both graveyards, plenty of options. Glintstream Siphoners, that could be 4/4s with Menace. Walking Ballistas, which looks to be the case that we're going to go for here. That's going to be a 4/4 that you can invest 4 mana to any time. And it's probably going to be a swing for 9 in addition to those life loss triggers.
Tim, be it just a lowly 2 here after the attack.
it's into Trendle's turn, taking a look at that draw step, thinking about what can get him out of this situation. And I can say it, and it looks like he doesn't see it either. That's going to be Mark Herberholz taking the win here, continuing the win streak.
Yeah.
Won the PTQ, and now he's heading into round 4, 3-0.
Just a force of savagery.
6-0 on the day. That's a good way to do it. So, black-blue mid-range is going to take down black-green Constrictor here at round 3 to kick things off. Was there anything in that you saw? Because I think we're going to have an opportunity to actually talk to Mark, but you were talking, you thought that black-green deck was going to be really favored in that one. What went wrong?
So what went wrong in the post-border game was that, first of all, the Shaper Sanctuary came down after a bunch of stuff had happened. There was a missed trigger on the Shaper Sanctuary, so it ended up just being kind of 1 green to discard a card as opposed to an actual engine. Those cards came down at a stage of the game where Mark was able to pivot and become the aggressor. We saw Mark with removal spells and interaction in his hand, and because he was up against Lifecrafters, Bestiary, and Shaper Sanctuary, instead of playing a game where he was attempting to interact and be the more controlling player, he just started using cards like Supreme Will to dig as aggressively as possible to try to find copies of Scarab God. And he was lucky enough to find 2 copies of it. The first one got dealt with. If he did not find the second copy of Scarab God, it's very likely he would have just lost. He would have just gotten run over by the card advantage from the Bestiary and the Sanctuary. However, because he played the game in the way he did, because he decided, I'm going to push as hard as I can to find Scarab Gods, that gave him the opportunity to find that second Scarab God. It went unanswered, and it was able to win the game very easily. So Mark found what was important in the game and pushed it as hard as he could, got a little bit lucky, and it worked out for him.
And I think we're going to have the opportunity to talk to Mark. Mark, how you doing? This is TJ Rogers and Jake Van Lunen. You have been on a hot streak today.
Yeah, so far so good. Won the Modern PTQ, so it's been pretty awesome so far.
Yeah, heading into this game, you are on blue-black mid-range, coming off of Corey Burkhardt's top 8. How do you feel about that deck heading into this tournament here today? A lot of those 1-toughness creatures against Chain Whirlers.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. I played in the PPTQ, the teams one, with Ben Lundquist and Michael Jacob, and Michael Jacob played the blue-black mid-range deck, and I watched him stream a ton with it. We talked about it a ton. Surprisingly, it actually has a good matchup against the red decks with Chain Whirler, and I talked to Corey a bit about it, and he gave me his list. He was really high on it, and it just seemed like a good metagame choice. I'm pretty partial to Nexus of Fate, but this weekend I felt like maybe I might want to get lunch after a round at some point, so I thought maybe Turbo Fog wasn't the choice.
And of course, we saw when you drew that second, the Scarab God, how good did that feel?
Yeah, I wasn't exactly sure how he was going to sideboard because there's different flavors of green-black. So I sideboarded to leave me really weak if he had Shaper Sanctuary and Bestiary. And he ended up having those, so I had to kind of shift my game plan to be a lot more aggressive and not really go for the late game. And then obviously hitting the second Scarab God just kind of was the perfect draw for that game plan.
Yeah, great. So an interesting question I have for you is, what did you play in the Modern PTQ?
Well, I mean, you guys know that me and Gabriel Nassif are close, so obviously I played blue-white. A little bit different than the list he advocates. I like 4 Terminus and 4 Opt. He's Supreme Verdict, Wrath of God, Serum Vision type guy. I just love doing stuff on my opponent's turn. It seems like you get these little small edges because they're not quite certain what you have, what you're going to do, and those add up after a tournament.
Sense. So, yeah, I mean, you already kind of went over shifting gears there in the second game. Going into the second game, I had seen both sideboards. I thought you were going to be at a pretty big disadvantage against both the Bestiary and the Shaper Sanctuary. When you switched gears there and you started just aggressively looking for the Scarab God, what's the point of the game where you realize that that's how you need to win the game, that you need to stop relying on removal spells? Is it as soon as you see that Shaper Sanctuary, or are you looking for a different moment in time?
Well, when he played the Shaper Sanctuary, I still had a little bit of hope left because he only had 2 cards in hand and the board state was pretty empty. But once the Bestiary came down, it was like, oh, good Lord, this is going to escalate quickly. So, yeah, I mean, the Shaper Sanctuary definitely changes it. And at that point, I was thinking, okay, I need to concentrate more on counter spells, not removal. And then when he played the Bestiary, I'm like, okay, well, counter spells aren't going to work either. I just have to go beat downs.
Well, it worked out for you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us, and good luck in your next round.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks a lot, guys.
Looks like he had the same that you did, you know? Heading into that one, let's get set, and let's really shift gears into the aggressive side of things.
Yeah, so a great plan by Mark. Beautiful to watch.
All right. Well, we're going to have more Magic for you here in round 3 right after these messages. Welcome back to round 3 here at Grand Prix Los Angeles. TJ Rogers joined by Jake Van Lunen, and we have got some more magic for you through the power of Time Walk. So let's head on down to the field. And it is going to be Andrew Lozano on the left up against Tom Martell. Now, Martell is on an Esper control deck, and it looks like Lozano is going to be on, ooh, now this is interesting.
Yeah, red-blue Godfarrow's Gift. This is an aggressive version of the Godfarrow Gift deck. He's Gate to Afterlifing. Pretty cool list here from him. Some interesting stuff going on. I'm excited to watch it play out.
It's going to be a turn 1 Beaumont, Corey. Yeah, this is a card that, or a deck that broke out at GP Seattle back in April. And I haven't really seen a whole lot of activity from it since. And it looks like Martell is going to go with that turn 2 Search for Azcanta. Such a powerful card throughout the game. And when that transforms into Azcanta, the Sunken Rune can be just monstrous.
And I like Andrew Lozano's plan here as a gift deck to be playing the Beaumont Couriers. I think that Beaumont Courier is absolutely the best card you can have if you're planning on being the aggressor against the more controlling decks in the format right now. I found that when I was practicing this week, hands that were just Beaumont Courier and lands were like better than a lot of my hands that had like 2, 3, 4 curve outs when I was playing against these control decks. So this could be an interesting angle, and I'm excited to see how this version of Gift works out. I mean, he's already 2-0 here.
Yep. Minister of Inquiries on the battlefield alongside that Beaumont Courier, which has already got 2 cards underneath it. And Martell, only a Search for Azcanta on the battlefield, going to be cycling a land here on the third turn of the game. Isolated Chapel and a pass back to Lozano.
Yeah, Tom Martell, no slouch at all. This man is a Pro Tour champion.
So that Minister of Inquiries is going to be a really nice way to fill up the graveyard. You know, it looks like the kind of card that you would put into your mill deck, but it's actually going to be pointing at himself. For that ability, it's going to put 3 cards into the graveyard. What that helps do is facilitate those Gate to the Afterlife. Those do require 6 creatures in the graveyard to be able to search for your Godfarrow's Gift. It also just means that you are going to have more cards in the graveyard to transform, search for Azcantas if they are in this deck, though I don't actually think that they are in this version.
No, he's just, he's putting Champion of Wits into his graveyard. He's putting those Angel of Inventions in his graveyard so he can reanimate them with the Godfarrow's Gift. That's his plan.
All right. It's going to be Gate to the Afterlife. Whenever one of these creatures dies for Lozano, is going to have the opportunity to draw a card, then discard a card. So that's also going to help fill out that graveyard. 4 mana for Martell at the moment alongside that Search for Azcanta. We've got Teferi in hand. We have got Torrential Gearhulk, and I think I saw an Essence Scatter floating around in there. We're going to go ahead and target ourselves with this Minister of Inquiry. So Andrew Lozano putting 3 cards into the bin. Looks like one of them is going to be that Stitcher Supplier. New card out of Core Set 2019, a zombie. Another phenomenal card for filling up that graveyard.
Yeah, so this is actually a Grixis gift deck. He can cast Angel of Invention, but only off of Ether Hub.
Takes a bit of energy to do that. Mostly Minister of Inquiries able to provide some, as well as those Ether Hubs. It's going to be land coming down. We've got Skirk Prospector in hand alongside a Walking Ballista, I believe. And that is going to be the Skirk Prospector that comes down. Interesting little card. Sacrifice a Goblin, add red to your mana pool.
Yeah, a card that can work really nicely for getting yourself the number of creatures you need in your graveyard to activate Gate to the Afterlife, while also giving you the mana you need to potentially play Gate and activate it on the same turn.
Yeah, ends up replacing itself in a lot of ways. Plus, when you do have that Gate to the Afterlife, you are able to then draw a card, discard a card, so it can even do a little bit of extra duty in filtering those draws.
Another nice thing about it is that you can tap all your lands and still have mana to activate a Beaumont Courier if your opponent plays some type of board sweeper.
Glimmer of Genius coming down for Martell. We're going to take a look. Scry 2, then draw 2. Also, get a couple of energy. Helps out with any Ether Hubs that might be in the deck. Looks like, I think there might be 3 copies of Teferi in this hand right now. So drawing a couple of cards. Looks like I did see some land in there, and we're going to go for that Search for Azkan to trigger at the beginning, deciding if we want to leave that on top or in the graveyard. That's going to be a draw. Looks like a couple of lands with a draw off of that Glimmer of Genius. Taking a look at Gate to the Afterlife, making sure what that card does. It's got several lines of text.
An interesting card. It helps you fill up the graveyard pretty quickly, helps you find key cards, and then drops Godfarrow's Gift onto the table, and that just wins you games.
Yeah, excellent facilitator of that 7-mana card because it's able to search your graveyard, your hand, and your library. So even duressing it, earlier in the game, getting rid of that Godfarrow's Gift, it doesn't have the same issue with some combo decks historically where you're able to search up the combo piece from your library, but if you draw it, you're out of luck. This one, it does allow you to search all 3 of those avenues. So drawing it, not so much of a downside. Losing it to any sort of discard or just having it destroyed by an Abrade, a future one will be able to search that graveyard and still bring it in.
Nifty trick if any of you play Magic Online and you want to experiment with any of these Gate to the Afterlife decks. When it asks you, would you like to search your graveyard or hand for a copy of Godfarrow's Gift after you activate it, and then it says in parentheses, you may also search your library. You click yes, you don't click no, and because if you click no, you don't get a second option. It's not like, oh, now would you like to search your library? So click yes when you're activating your Gate to the Afterlife on Magic Online.
Then, I do like the clause. You only shuffle your library if you searched it. If you only went through the hand in the graveyard, you don't have to. So we're going to see this Beaumont Courier. There are, is that 5 cards? 4 cards underneath it. Got itself a 5-story penthouse, and it looks like it has decided to cash that in, sell it, pick up those 5 cards. That does mean that we are going to have the death trigger as well, so that Gate to the Afterlife able to go for a draw and then a discard. And I think I do see an Angel of Invention in this hand, another copy of Skirk Prospector. 2 copies of Skirk Prospector. I wonder what the creature count in the graveyard is at this point. I've lost track of it somewhat, and there's a bunch of overlapping cards. I think that we are at 4. It looks like we are not. We are apparently at 6, so we're able to activate that Gate to the Afterlife.
Yeah, the Beaumont Courier did a decent job of filling that graveyard up.
Yeah, discarding all those cards from the hand, just absolutely filled it up. We're going to search our library for that gift, that Godfarrow's Gift, and unless there is an instant speed answer that can happen before combat for Tom Martell in hand, this is going to start running away. 4 4s jumping into the fray with haste. It's going to be a lot of damage coming in.
Yeah, the Angel of Invention just represents so much damage. And when it comes out on the battlefield, it can come in as a 6/6 a lot of the time with lifelink, or you can make it, come in with servos and be a 4/4 lifelinking attacker. Pre-board, the Esper control decks rarely have more than 1 or 2 board sweeping effects. Looks like Tom may have none in the main.
That is going to be unfortunate.
Yeah, so that Angel of Invention and Gifted will be pretty nice here for him.
We're firing down that Glimmer of Genius, just trying to get as much information as we can. But things look dire for Martell here in Game 1. Godfarrow's Gift, it's a 7-mana artifact, and it's certainly earned its converted mana cost here. We're going to be untapping on Lozano's side of things, and as soon as we head into combat, it's going to be taking a look. Doesn't even actually target when it's looking at that graveyard. So we have, there are some cards in Standard that allow you to target cards that are in the graveyard. Not an option against this one. If that one's gone, nothing going to do about it. Angel Invention coming on down. And it looks like we might just be going for the +1/+1 counters, because that is going to be 2 of them. It is a base level 4/4, so that means that it's attacking in for 6. In addition to this Minister of Inquiries, this is a massive swing with flying, with lifelink.
Yeah, and I like this attack a lot from Andrew Lozano, specifically because by putting the 2 ++1 counters on the Angel of Invention, and making this Minister of Inquiries bigger, he's now threatening lethal on the following turn, which will drastically change the way that Tom has to play this game. No longer can Tom use a card like Teferi to interact with just the Godfather's Gift or just the Angel of Invention, because if he does so, he'll find himself dead. So it's really forcing Tom to have multiple answers in the following turn, or a big card like Torrential Gearhulk along with a nice one in the graveyard.
I think we do have the Torrential Gearhulk. The question is, do we have anything in the graveyard that can actually get us all the way there? We're going to go ahead and put a land in the graveyard, but that does transform our Search for Azcanta into Azcanta the Sunken Rune. So the 6th land acquired anyway, plus already does have that one in hand. We're going to be heading into Tom's turn with the potential of 7 mana this turn because of the transformation of that Search for Azcanta. Draws into Torrential Gearhulk. 2 copies of it currently. Is there a way out from this? Look at this graveyard. I see a bunch of Skirk Prospectors, some Stitcher Suppliers. Not any more Angel of Inventions. That's a good sign.
Yeah, though Andrew does have another one in hand, so there are lots of ways that he could end up putting that to the graveyard in the very near future.
Play Bomat Courier, activate immediately. Gets the job done. And it looks like Lozano took that one down. So Martel is going to be heading into it through the power of Time Walk. We're skipping all the shuffling, skipping all the sideboarding, and we are just diving right into it. Esper Control going to be on the play, and Lozano is going to follow up on his first turn with a Bomat Courier. Worked last time. Let's bring it back.
Yeah, and again, I mean, this Bomat Courier is just about the best card against these controlling decks in Standard right now. If you're having trouble against Fog opponents, against Storm opponents, against these Esper Control opponents, Bomat Courier is the card you are looking for.
And we're going to see a Fatal Push take down that Bomat Courier before it can get out of hand. No red mana available. Doesn't even have the option to sacrifice it, though. I doubt you'd be pitching your opening hand just for the one card that might be underneath it. The mystery does have to remain, by the way. Those cards off to the side, and they are going to continue being face down. Minister of Inquiry is coming down to the battlefield, using some of that energy, though gaining some of it back. And it's going to be 2 copies of that Minister of Inquiries. That's going to fill up the graveyard very quickly. Gate to the Afterlife in hand. When that comes down, it's going to be an accelerated way to get that Godpharaoh's Gift on the battlefield. If Martel doesn't have a way to stop it, though, we do have a Disallow in hand, so that is going to be a nice option at one point.
Yeah, Disallow having the ability to counter the activated ability on Gate to the Afterlife really coming up quite a lot when you play this matchup.
Getting aggressive with the Minister of Inquiries.
Yeah, choosing to save his energy to use colored mana with those Ether Hubs, recognizing that the ability to cast his spells is very important.
It's good advice for anyone, really. There's going to be a Godpharaoh's Gift, a Walking Ballista, and a land to the graveyard. That Stitcher Supplier now out and about. And it's just kind of the mediocre beatdown from Andrew Lozano right now, but Martel hasn't put up anything that's going to stop it. A handful of counterspells does not stop the 1/1s. And we're still 2 lands away from able to put a Torrential Gearhulk in front of them.
Once that Torrential Gearhulk comes down, it's going to be real hard for Lozano to get back into this one.
I love seeing these just 1-power beatdowns.
Yeah.
It's just a good time.
Let's see how far it can take us.
Duress here from Lozano. We're going to get some information about what to prepare ourselves for as well. It's going to be Glimmer of Genius in response. Tell me a little bit about, we've seen this twice now. In response to a Duress, their opponent has cast in one case Supreme Will, in the other case Glimmer of Genius, trying to fire down that card draw before it's looked at by the Duress. Tell me a little bit.
So here in this case, it's because Glimmer of Genius was the best card in his hand. So yes, now he may have an option in Cleansing Nova, or an option in whatever else that might be better. The fact that Glimmer of Genius was the best card in his hand meant that he could protect it by simply casting it and gaining card advantage on the spot. In the last match, when we saw Mark Herberholtz fire off a Supreme Will, in response to a duress. He was doing so because he was trying to replace that Supreme Will in his hand with Scarab God, which you cannot take out of somebody's hand with duress. So different reason each time, but there are just so many different ways to play against your opponent playing duress, and so many ways to play with duress yourself. Really skill-intensive Magic card.
We're going to get rid of that Cleansing Nova, and we are left with Syncopate, Disallow, and Cleansing Nova in hand. And we're going to draw into a Vraska's Contempt. Going to go ahead and put down a tapped land, see what we can come up with. And it's right back to Lozano.
Yeah, so it looks like Andrew has a few Angels stranded in his hand. Definitely not where he wants them. He would really love to have some creatures die once he gets that gate onto the battlefield so that he can discard those Angels, draw a Champion of Wits, discard the Angels. Right now, they're basically just dead cards in hand. So Tom, even though it looks like he's under pressure, he's losing on the board, I have to imagine he's feeling very, very good about his chances this game.
Vraska's Contempt on a 1-power creature. Not something that you see every day.
And now it's Gear Hulk time, though.
Yes. Gear Hulk, Disallow, Syncopate. A lot of options available. Depending on, and right now, Lozano's been struggling on actually hitting mana. We're finally sitting at a land that does not require energy just to cast spells. Martel's got options. If you want to go for the Torrential Gear Hulk, great. Take that one down, and you can go for the Vraska's Contempt, but you also have access to 2 of these counter spells. And if Lozano tries to play anything that's actually going to just be impactful to the board in general, go for it, and then next turn you'll have access to that Torrential Gear Hulk alongside that Disallow. There's going to be Gate to the Afterlife. And I think right now Martel considering, A, is this worth countering, and B, using the Disallow or using the Syncopate. One of them does put it in exile. It also does, it's a card that as mana increases or, whatever you have left, it can certainly falter somewhat, but only 3 lands on Lozano's side.
Yeah, and an interesting reason why you would, want to use a card like Syncopate here is because the Disallow also has the ability to counter future activations of other gates.
Oh, okay. So by saving that in hand, we could go for the Syncopate now, and if there's another Gate to the Afterlife, which there is, in hand, then eventually you could use the Disallow to actually eliminate that one from activating and continue to buy yourself some time. Looks like it's just going to be Torrential Gear Hulk into Glimmer of Genius, though. Martel going to be patient, not going to try and respond to the cards on board, and just keep putting more cards in hand.
And Tom, I like this play a lot from him. Again, recognizing that just simply with what's on the table, he is currently winning. He has many more cards in hand in addition to what is simply on the table. And all he has to do is prevent Andrew from getting a Godfarrow's Gift onto the battlefield. If he can prevent a Godfarrow's Gift from hitting, then this game is all but over in his favor.
And even looking at the hand right now, if one Godfarrow's Gift gets on the battlefield, it's not even going to actually matter that much. We do have a copy of Forsake the Worldly in hand for Martel. There's going to be the Torrential Gear Hulk crashing in. It's going to be 5 damage, despite the fact that Lozano has been attacking this entire game. Suddenly the race is in Martel's favor on the first swing.
Yeah, and that's the problem with getting aggressive with your 1-power guys. I mean, it just doesn't do enough fast enough. Andrew didn't really have an option with his draw this game. And I think having double Ether Hub and drawing a bunch of inexpensive cards that do not have colorless mana and their casting cost punished him in many ways. But yeah, we're just seeing the power of Torrential Gear Hulk here. I mean, coming down, getting to cast a free Glimmer, getting a 5/6, everybody's happy. Except for Andrew, of course.
Half the players are happy.
Yes.
All right.
And all the viewers, right?
That's true. People love Glimmer Genius.
Yeah. Torrential Gear Hulk, that's a crowd favorite.
It's going to be Forsake the Worldly in response to this block. That Stitcher Supplier, when it dies, would put 3 cards in the graveyard, plus there would be the triggered ability from Gate to the Afterlife, which would be draw a card. If you do, discard a card. So we saw Lozano very eagerly throw that blocker in the way, and this time Martel is going to respond to it, take away some of that value, and eliminate the chance that it could activate after we see those cards enter into the graveyard. Kitesail Freebooter in the graveyard. I think we're going to do a quick count. We might be looking from Lozano's side as trying to play Gate to the Afterlife and then immediately activate it. And unfortunately, I think Martel's got the answer to that.
Yeah, it looks like there is a disallow in hand here for Tom Martel.
Yep, and still does have access to that Syncopate. A couple of Angel Inventions and a Champion of Wits as well.
Yeah, Champion of Wits, a perfect card here for Andrew right now.
That's going to be the play. It would be draw 2, discard 2. The Syncopate in this case would actually be pretty nice because it could eliminate it from even entering into the graveyard, which means that having access with 2 mana down the line, maybe there's a land in hand, it would mean that you're not looking at the Eternalize ability of this Champion of Wits as well. Minister of Inquiries against the Torrential Gearhulk. It's going to be Syncopate. Looks like we are going to pay 4 mana. That's going to be blue, and then X. Counter target spell unless its controller pays X. In this case, it needs to be 3. Cannot pay it, and it is exiled instead of put into the graveyard. So Lozano debating the options as far as any sort of follow-up play. Gate to Afterlife in hand, and I think it's just, do you block with the Minister of Inquiries or do you attack with it? Looks like we're on the blocking plan, maybe the block and activation game plan.
Mm-hmm. Maybe even the take it activation game plan.
Teferi, the draw for Martel. That's a good Magic card. Attack for 5, no block. That's going to be down to 10. And we are looking at enough mana to both play the Teferi and still hold up the disallow, and this is before you even start untapping the lands. I would be surprised if we didn't end up just plussing this one, drawing a card, putting more into hand, start drawing 2 cards every single turn.
Yeah, Tom's got to be very, very, very happy with the situation he's in right now. I mean, Andrew, all but nothing left.
There's a Bomat Courier and a Walking Bliss in the graveyard. I guess that's nice. We are going to use an energy to activate that Minister of Inquiry, so only one of these Ether Hubs can actually tap for mana, which means functionally cannot cast the Angel of Invention. There were 2 Ether Hubs. There was 2 energy. Now it is no longer an option to try hard casting those Angel of Inventions. It's going to be Kitesail Freebooter that comes down to the battlefield, the 1/2 for 2 with flying. When it enters, you take a look at their hand, you try and grab an instant or sorcery. Martel is fine with it. Take your best shot.
Now take a look what I got.
It's Vraska's Contempt and Disallow. Which one do you want? I've still got a Torrential Gearhulk and a Teferi. You're going to have to block with that Kitesail Freebooter eventually.
And Teferi can easily get one of these cards just back to Tom's hand if he wants it to.
Also true. You put it a little bit buried in the library, and you would also get the card back. Kitesail Freebooter, while it does take an instant or sorcery, once it leaves the battlefield, you do get it back. So it's Minister of Inquiries and Kitesail Freebooter up against Torrential Gearhulk and Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. The power level of one board is a bit higher than the other.
Yeah, I would say so.
You know, but we're attacking in with Minister of Inquiries. That's got to feel pretty good. And it's going to be Gate to the Afterlife that comes down. Firing down that Vraska's Contempt was not a whole lot of options for Lozano at that point, you know. Whichever card that he takes, if he tries taking the Vraska's Contempt, your Gate to the Afterlife isn't going to make it down. And if you try taking the counterspell, then that Vraska's Contempt is going to just get it right back. Swinging for 5. We're going to be down to 5. We're going to go ahead and put that back into the library, eliminating any chance of it doesn't want to take that shot. And now it is a Torrential Gearhulk that is likely going to be closing out the game unless some form of energy and mana is found, because that is 2 Angel of Invention trapped in hand that have not been able to do anything. No ability to discard, and it's going to be Kitesail Freebooter that hits the field, and actually we might be looking at exactly the same hand.
Yeah.
Throw it down. Oh, man. If Martel's got to feel good if he gets to just back-to-back turns throw down the exact same 3 cards. Take your shot. No, we're going to eliminate that with the Vraska's Contempt, and we're going to head into a Game 3. Lozano kicks things off. Stitcher's Supplier, 3 cards into the graveyard immediately for him.
And Andrew, probably, again, unhappy that he has to use Ether Hub on the very first turn of the game.
Land into the graveyard. You want it to be creatures, but you didn't want to draw the 3 lands. Martel contemplating the opening land of the turn. I'm a little bit curious about what kind of decisions can come into play as the very beginning of the game. There are cards like Glacial Fortress that require you to control an island or a plains, but there are, of course, that basic swamp in hand that would not lend itself well to that. And it is because we are planning on going for that turn 1 duress over having a land that would enter the battlefield tapped. We're going to take a look, and it is Champion of Wits, Treasure Mage, 2 lands, and actually, 2 Champion of Wits. That Treasure Mage is an interesting inclusion. When it enters the battlefield, you search your library for an artifact with converted mana cost 3.
Yeah.
Gate to the Afterlife. CMC
Cost
3.
3. People have been playing around 2 to 3 Trophy Mages in gift decks as of late. I played a league with a gift deck earlier this weekend. I played 2 copies of the Trophy Mage, and I was really impressed with them.
Gotta feel kind of bad. Throw down a duress, not be able to take anything. Just taking a peek. Don't even get to draw a card.
Feels the worst. It's honestly, when you see that, it's really hard to not think that you sideboarded incorrectly when you make a decision like that. And maybe you didn't. Maybe those cards are the cards that matter, if you will. And it's good that your opponent doesn't have them, but it still feels really frustrating.
We see the attack in for 1. Champion of Wits going to hit the battlefield. We're going to draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards. So far, it's only the 3 lands in there. So Gate to the Afterlife, it requires 6 to really start activating, and we are 0% of the way there. It's going to be another land and Treasure Mage that hops in. We did see that from the duress, though that land is actually new. The 2 lands that we saw from that duress peak were both blue-red lands. So an Ether Hub is the draw, and Martel still sitting nice and patient. You know, there's a land in the graveyard. We cycled 1. And that Glacial Fortress does enter the battlefield tapped. It will enter the battlefield untapped if you control an island or a plains, but that Drowned Catacomb also not an island, and that basic swamp not going to allow it. Negate is the draw right after that Gate to the Afterlife hits the battlefield.
Yeah, Tom now needs to find an answer for the gate or the God's Flower gift that it'll have the ability to turn into in the not-too-distant future.
3 power on board of Vraska's Contempt opposing them, but that is not going to get fired off. We might be looking at a Glimmer of Genius instead. We've seen Martel really loving to do that when there's the opportunity. Open 4 mana, go for it. Open 6 mana, Torrential Gearhulk, Glimmer. And it's going to be a duress here from Lozano, pointed right at Tom Martel. And we're going to see Negate, Glimmer of Genius, Vraska's Contempt, Torrential Gearhulk. What a hand.
This is a nice one here from Tom. Has 4 lands, can cast every card except the Gearhulk. Once he is able to cast that Gearhulk, he's going to be feeling really good about himself. Needs to find an answer for the gate or the God's Flower gift that it's going to become, but has 2 Glimmer of Geniuses in order to do it. In this game, because he recognizes that that's what matters. That gate and the potential God's Flower gift are the things that matter. He's not firing off these glimmers in response to that duress, instead holding them in his hand, hoping that he can exchange those for some type of artifact removal that is also just while also accruing some level of card advantage.
Yeah, you'd hate to go ahead and Glimmer of Genius into Invoke the Divine. immediately get that taken by the duress, and you're out of luck. I don't think there's a whole lot of copies in this deck list. I'm sorry, Forsake the Worldly, not Invoke the Divine.
Yeah. It's usually a one of.
There's going to be that other copy. Well, I guess it's going to be the Vraska's Contempt that hits the graveyard, so we still do have 2 copies of Glimmer of Genius. One of these comes down. We're going to scry 2, draw 2. Also does have that copy of Negate in hand, so if we can answer at least one Gate to the Afterlife, we'll be able to answer any follow-up ones for just a nice, cool 2 mana. Realize Martel, I think, just running through all the possibilities. Have you seen Martel play? Is he someone who is a very kind of studious running through the lines, running through the options? Is he an intuitive player?
I mean, he's a very deliberate player. He's somebody who I've seen, I've kind of seen him grow as a player. When I first started doing really well at Magic tournaments, I would draft with him in New York City, and he would be a good player. But then in the matter of like 2 or 3 years, he transformed himself into being one of the absolute best players in the entire world. And it was really impressive. Now he's kind of stepped away from the game. He's doing more actual work, but you'll still see him stream occasionally. At the beginning of the summer, he was out cubing constantly. And here we get to see him on camera in round 3, potentially getting wrecked by a Godsfire gift deck. A pretty cool Grixis Godsfire gift deck, by the way.
Yeah, Kitesail Freebooter is going to enter the battlefield, join the Champion of Wits, 2 of them, as well as that Stitcher Supplier, and we're going to Fatal Push it. Anyway, we do get to take a look at this hand, though at this point, not a whole lot of good to be done because that entire ability is written into one singular one. Sure, it can take one that it immediately goes back to the hand.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot of good to be had there. Glimmer of Genius, we're going to go ahead and do another one of these Scry 2s, and we see him do that same thing again. Put them to the side, consider his hand, run through the options, put them both on the bottom, draw 2.
And notice how Andrew Lozano leaving open this 2 mana, trying to threaten the gate in case something happens to his creatures on the battlefield. As soon as he gets 6 creatures onto the battlefield, he'll have access to that. Has the backup gate in hand, can really just throw down a 1-2 punch here, forcing Martel to have multiple ways to interact with and beat a card like Godsfire Gift. And also at this point, I mean, Martel's life total is low enough where Andrew can kind of just keep that as a different angle of attack, where he's forcing Tom to leave open mana, represent things like Disallow in order to turn off the gate, and just be aggressive with the creatures he has on the board.
These 2 players signed up for the Graveyard Exchange.
Yeah.
Pass them off to each other. Take a little bit.
May I look at yours? I'll also look at yours, please.
It's a nice way to, sharing.
Yeah.
Got to keep the balance. And there is Torrential Gearhulk. Interesting the timing of this one. Looks like we are going to do this at the upkeep.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to take down that Champion of Wits. So, Tom Martel flashes in Torrential Gearhulk at the upkeep. He eliminates the Champion of Wits. It is exiled. He gains 2 life. And it is back into Lozano's turn.
Yeah, so the reason he's doing that during the upkeep and not during Andrew's end step is because, or not during his own turn, is because he wants to make sure that Andrew doesn't get an opportunity to use the 2 mana that he has on the board in some way. And by leaving his mana untapped, he's kind of forcing Andrew to just sit there and untap his lands, and he's getting to use his mana most efficiently while forcing his opponent to go without using those 2 lands for a whole turn.
We're going to see Essence Extraction, Negate, and looks like Lozano is going to take away the Essence Extraction. 3 mana, deal 3 damage to a creature, gain 3 life. It's going to be right back to Tom Martel. 5-6 on the battlefield, looking down that Champion of Wits. There are 2 Gate to the Afterlifes, not yet at the position of being able to activate, and Martel not really at the point, I think, of being able to stop it.
And Martel really just, he doesn't have the cards that he needs to deal with a Godsfire Gift. And the moment that Andrew has enough creatures in his graveyard, Tom's just going to be in the worst situation. Although, for what it's worth, Tom has such powerful cards in his hand. Like, if there's any hand that can find its way out of a situation like this, it's Tom's hand.
It's so interesting to where Tom's, he's being cautious about attacking. He's got to be cautious about blocking because anything that he does, it's going to put more creatures into the graveyard. And I'm willing to bet that there are 5 creatures in the graveyard right now based on how this is working. And the second that 6th creature is in the graveyard, we're going to see that activation. Fatal Push goes underneath the Kitesail Freebooter for Lozano. It's going to be another one of these Torrential Gearhulks. Scry 2, draw 2, get 2 energy. At this point, even going for the singular, Forsake the Worldly doesn't do it. At this point, there are 2 copies of this Gate to the Afterlife. If one of them goes for a Godpharaoh's Gift, great, you can answer that one. But then this other copy can grab either another one from the library or that same one out of the graveyard. Needs to answer both of these.
He did find a card that works right now. He found Cleansing Nova. And Cleansing Nova will get all these artifacts on the board. An issue, though, is that it's worth noting that Torrential Gearhulk is also an artifact.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so
instead of destroy all creatures, you can go for destroy all artifacts and enchantments. Does eliminate your board, and when you were at 5 and looking down a Stitcher Supplier, a Kitesail Freebooter, and a Champion of Wits, that is an equally dangerous line.
Tom may, if I were Tom, I imagine, my goal would be to try to set up a turn where I'm using that Cleansing Nova on my turn after I've forced my opponent to activate multiple gates. Just get myself in a situation where I'm putting my opponent just on no resources left. And I think that Tom is really nice, making a really nice line here. By blocking there, he's turning on both of these gates, but Andrew's already had his combat step. So even though Andrew has both gates, Andrew's not going to be able to actually get a Godpharaoh Gift trigger on this turn. He's going to have to wait until the next turn, and by then, Cleansing Nova will have already cleaned everything up.
Yep, can't save those Gate to the Afterlives because... And it looks like we are actually going to be jumping back up to the booth. Looks like some time considerations are starting to come into effect. To just kind of clarify, to round it out, it looks like Tom Martell was the winner of that match, a line similar to what you were proposing, I'm going to guess.
Yeah, I imagine Cleansing Nova had something to do with that.
All right, so that is going to take us to the end of round 3. I'm TJ Rogers, this is Jake Van Lunen, and we'll be right back with round 4.